And welcome back to our second episode of Courage Under Pressure. I'm Scott Spalding, the firefighter engineer and co-founder of Fire Zone Fit, and I'm excited y'all are joining us tonight on Zoom. And eventually we will have this on YouTube and Spotify as well. But last week we sat down with U.S. Navy Chief Diver Jeremy Wagner for one of the most raw and powerful conversations that I've ever been a part of during a live event. And Jeremy shared how setbacks, close calls, and personal struggles shaped his path from surviving not just one, but two life threatening medical events, losing two fraternity brothers, to facing moments of absolute rock bottom. He walked us through the discipline, accountability, and perspective that allowed him to rebuild his mind, body, and spirit when odds were stacked against him, but the best is yet to come. And tonight we continue that conversation. This is not just Jeremy's story, but it's a story about resilience, the decision to keep moving forward when everything in us says to quit, and what it takes to come back even stronger. And whether you're a first responder, military, or just someone facing your own battles, there are lessons here that matter for all of us. And we'll dig deeper into the themes of discipline, accountability, and mental toughness, and explore what it means to carry these lessons forward in everyday life. And as always, I encourage you to take notes, drop your questions in the chat, and stay engaged. We're also going to try and, like I said, share this on YouTube, the event page on Facebook, as well as Spotify. We do want this to be more than just a story. We want it to be an experience that you can apply to your own journey. And with that, I will pass this on to my business partner and fraternity brother, Luke Morrow. Luke, take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Hey, folks, Luke Morrow here. I am a National Academy of Sports Medicine certified personal trainer and certified nutrition coach. My background is in primarily cybersecurity and executive protection for the last 20 plus years. And was involved with the fire service in my 20s with search and rescue and other volunteer capacities with some agencies down in Central Texas. So um, that's kind of where I came back into the working with Scott and founding our company Fire Zone Fit. So with that, enough about me, Jeremy. Let's hear the rest of the story. We can't wait to hear the rest.
Yeah, no problem. First and foremost, I just want to say, hey, I am really grateful to you guys for giving me this opportunity and having this type of platform. I would have never thought, a million years ago that somebody, hey, do you want to speak about your story? That's just not something that I thought that I would ever hear. So thank you very much. I wanted to start this one by kind of asking both of you, like you guys, you approached me a couple weeks ago and were like, hey, would you like to tell your story? And of course, I just spoke about that. But I'm curious, like, what is the overarching goal of this? What is the hope of my story to other people that you guys might have envisioned, I guess?
Yeah, I'll go first. For me, I guess I had been seeing you posting some things on Facebook, and it'd been a long time since I'd talked to you, and just the more we kind of interacted on Facebook, just seeing the motivational stuff, you working out, talking about nutrition, all that kind of stuff, I was like, man, that's really awesome. He's not only doing good for himself, but he's really trying to inspire others and make a good impact on in the lives of others. And you were also posting some motivational stuff, so once we reconnected and actually had some conversations there, I realized, man, you've got an incredible story. There's so much to it that I feel like could really make a difference in the lives of other people. And we can dive into that a little bit later, but that's really kind of where things got started with me. Obviously, we were fraternity brothers and we were roommates, back in college. But
That's gonna be a lot.
once we went our separate ways, and then reconnected again, I was really happy to see the journey that you were on and the track that you were on, and I was just like, man, we gotta figure out a way to get this out there. So that's kind of where I was coming from.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, Jeremy, I've been following you as well over the last several years. We just recently reconnected as well. I've seen your posts about the deaths that have happened in your life, the many, many deaths. the issues with the brain and the surgeries. And I've seen the photos of you in the hospital saying, I made it, I'm alive today. And I'm like, wow, this guy's a walking miracle. But more importantly, I can empathize, I can relate because in my own personal life, when I hit rock bottom, in many ways, right, with heavy drinking, drugging, uh, I there was an inflection point where I had two choices, and one was to escape into a bottle, and the other one was to lean into my fitness and health and really make that discipline and consistency my life. And that's what really got me through it. And I see that you also made a conscientious decision to do what was right, and you got there through your faith and other things you're going to talk about. So I'm really just excited to hear, a story of some redemption and a way just a way forward that maybe your experience and your through your strength and hope can inspire, or maybe there's somebody out there on the call today that's hurting, that needs to hear your story and how you got through it, so maybe they can feel like there's some hope, right? So that's my side.
Exactly. I'm happy you said that, because that was one of the points I really wanted to make, is that even if it just helps one person, if you know somebody that it might help, or maybe it's not these stories, maybe it'll be something else. Like, we all have contacts on Facebook. There's ways to reach out, and granted, we are not experts when it comes to emotions and counseling and that kind of stuff. But most of the guys I know that have gone down the wrong path, all it could have taken was somebody to listen to somebody vent. Like, it could have just been that was the deciding difference. And that's, it's other like-minded individuals that have been through something, that have empathy towards whatever you're going through, or can have empathy. And that is a deciding factor for a lot of people. One of the other things I wanted to briefly discuss, because I feel like everything that we're keying in on is so vitally important, not just to men's health, but to women's health, but it's that mental capacity to keep going. And I always think about one person whenever I think about that, because I always think, like, man, I really could have helped him somehow, or I could have. And for you guys that know him, it was Dwayne Oliver. He was like a brother growing up. He was in high school with me. I've known my for most of my entire life, and the way that he passed could have been prevented. And in my own opinion, which is not my medical expertise, but you took one of two paths. Life is hard, and either you can drown it with something, and unknowingly that could lead to your demise, or you can go the other route with it and seek support, seek help, find a way for redemption, find a way to persevere. And I pray about him every single day. There's not one day that goes by that I don't think about him. And it's important, I think, for people to understand that people care about you. So I want that to be like one of the focus points of this. It's like, hey, like if this does help you, or maybe you need something else, like, get that something else. Don't stop until you get to the point where you're happy with what you have. If you're not happy, then keep going. And with that, I'll go ahead and stop talking about that, but I'll go back to my story. If there's ever any questions during any of this, or if anybody just wants to talk about something, like, put it in the chat. Like, this can be an open forum. I feel like a lot of men's health, mental health, women's health, like, it all has to do with speaking whatever it is that's going on, and somebody listening to you in a way that's empathetic, and so that that people care. So if that's what this happens to be, then great. All right, then without that, I'll go back.
Jeremy, if you could kick us off with a little recap for those that missed part one of the series.
Yeah.
Let's dive right in.
So the quick recap is, basically, everybody has problems growing up in life. I had a lot of death in my earlier years. I couldn't process. That led me to a lot of bad decisions, and I ended up joining the Navy. And honestly, thank God for that. I'm really happy that I did. So, I joined the Navy, and that comes with its own kind of barriers and hurdles, especially if you're a stupid young man like me. And then that's kind of where we left off. I was in Guam. It was my first dive locker. I was I hated being a diver out there. After we suffered the loss of two people, one was a diver, one was somebody that wanted to go to dive school. The trajectory of I know of my life then just really started spiraling down, and I got in more trouble. I kept my nose just clean enough to keep me out of captain's mass, and basically it was like, what's the next thing? And so I wanted to get out of diving, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna put in for buds and go to be a SEAL. That's where the SEAL training. And my master diver, who we didn't like one another at all, and he basically said, hey, no. And I think his was more like of an attrition thing. He didn't want to lose a diver. And honestly, I probably would have failed out of that. I have no idea. That shit is super hard. So, but I know I didn't want to be a diver anymore. And so he basically said, hey, if you go to dive school, you can go to first class dive school. You'll get, carry-on orders wherever you want, and it basically comes with rank, pay, and I'm like, wow, I have a chance to go do this and probably fail, or do well, or go do this. And I know it's basically, I'm going to succeed. And I picked the easier route, 100%. But you can't really pass that up. And it led me to where I am today. So I have zero regrets with that. So while I'm at dive school, it's first class dive school in like 2001. I was 21 at the time, finally, in Panama City. So that comes with its own adventures. And then I remember specifically the last test that we had for dive school in first class. 9/11 happened. It was on 9/11. We had our test on 9/11. And we're sitting there, we're taking the test, and I'm thinking I'm probably hungover. And I'm sitting there trying to, get through this thing. And our proctor comes in. He's like, everybody stop, go and look to see what's going on. We all went to the gym where we had TVs because, we didn't have like computers like this and TVs like that. It was wherever you had one, you had to go to it. So we all go in there, we start watching. And we had to pick orders, I want to say, within a couple of days of that to where we were going. And that had a pretty large impact on what I wanted to do. So I picked one of the other specialized units. It was called VSW. It stood for very shallow water. It was a mine countermeasure detachment. It was called a wartime laboratory at the time, which means they got a whole bunch of really cool funding. And this place is made up of all the great people. I'm not saying other commands aren't, but we had like Navy SEALs were there. We had EOD, which are the explosive ordnance disposal guys. We had SWIC. I can't remember the acronym for that, but they're the guys that taxi around the SEALs, and they all have a lot of know-how when it comes to operations. And
Special Warfare Combat Crewmen.
Thank you. See, you even said it like 10 minutes ago, and I already forgot it. And then we had Marine Recon, and those guys are just the best of the sociopaths and psychopaths that do their job better than anybody else. So we had all these entities, plus Navy divers, So we had all these different entities, and the whole project was basically like the Dolphin Project. It was, and I don't want to sound douchey, and I'm probably going to. It's like, I don't know what all I can and can't say, so I'm just gonna keep it as vague as I possibly can. If somebody's on that's from the military and I beat you into it, just let me know. I'm pretty sure that most of this stuff is, you can probably look up most of it. I really don't know.
So tell us, like, what do you mean by the Dolphin Project? Like, for somebody that
Dolphin Projects is basically, and this is common knowledge. The Navy's been using dolphins since like Vietnam. We've been using them to find mine-like objects. There's a handful of different ways that they're being used, and I was like, cool, I want to go do that. And it was really good experience. And the reason I'm bringing up VSW is because this is where I had my first deployment, because as soon as I got there, we started doing workups for our first deployment to Iraq. And I met a really interesting individual that I loved so much. And his name was Austin Coath. And we called him Fast Eddie because he was this little hairy guy just that could run like the wind. And, one of the biggest things about going to any of these commands that have any kind of special functions is PT. Like, you just PT'd with everybody, and it was great camaraderie, and you had the best of friends, and you would go out and train, to what it is you're going to fight. And it was an amazing experience, and it was very much non-diver related. So I was like, great. I didn't like being a diver in Guam anyway. So this was very non-diverish. So, I went down that path, and I got to meet all these cool individuals. And there's a lot of stories. I met a lot of really, really cool people, but I think the trending behaviors were still just, I was a shithead. Like, there's no other easy way to say it. I was a horrible individual. I lived for nobody but myself. And I know I said this before, but every woman I've ever dated up until I met my wife, I should have treated so much better. Even my wife, whenever I first met her, I was still this selfish individual that I don't know if I didn't have the capacity, if I never learned to have the capacity. Oh, I didn't silence my cell phone, my bad. I will silence that. But so here I am, this bad person, and I treated women horribly. It was a notch. It was something else, that it shouldn't have been. And I truly did wreck every single relationship I had ever had. So that was the path I was continued to go down. I did not know God at that point in time in my life. And so then, you left, I left, and VSW ended up becoming a whole bunch of different places like NSCT1, and then, I think it's an EOD mobile unit now. So, and they still kind of use it for the same purpose, but it's way different. So, I moved on from there, and this is where my memory starts getting fuzzy. Sometimes I can't remember where I went. I think I was at LogSu now, which is it was a logistical support unit for the Navy SEALs. And so it was just basically like chamber duty for us. It was landlocked, it was chill, it was in Coronado, it was fantastic. And we would deploy to Bahrain by ourselves. And I've got some really interesting stories about those deployments just because they gave me some really weird jobs. And I guess a quick synopsis was, like they've sent me to Iraq on my own just to go and find dive gear. Just here's a set of orders, take your stuff, go. And I was there for, I don't know, I want to say like 3 weeks, just going from place to place and hitching rides with whatever unit was going.
How did that work out for you? I've heard the story before. Tell us about that one ride across the bridge.
Oh, so granted, I'm asking these, and I was a trash sailor. Like I was not squared away. I think for this trip, like I wore my own op camis that you had to sew back then. And I don't know if it's because I thought I was too cool for everything or what. Like people are going to think like I don't know, something. But totally douched it up. And so then I'm getting these orders. And I know I fly into, I want to say Kuwait first. And then we took a helo to, I don't even remember where the first base was. And now I've got these orders, and I'm basically just going to the talk and asking them, hey, who do you have going here? And they would just look at me like I had this dick on my forehead, like, what? Who are you and where are you going? I'm like, I don't know, just help me. And they would. And I end up teaming up with like these 3 other SEAL guys that were brand new, like they had just gotten out of training, and they didn't know who I was, and I knew who they were. And they're like, hey, we're going here. You need to go there. I'm like, yeah, let's head that way. And so either way, the story that Luke's talking about is it was nighttime. I don't remember what base I was trying to get to. I have no recollection. But at night, this is back whenever the Humvees were still super shitty. Like I didn't have the best armor on them still. I'm pretty sure people are still using their vests at some point in time. They might have just now started renditioning this, but that was probably like 2004, 2005 maybe. And so I'm in the back. I'm with these other guys that are going, and I'm like, yeah, we're going here, and it's nighttime. They all put on these NVGs, night vision goggles, and I don't have an NVG. Like I'm just lucky that I'm getting a ride. And so he's like, okay, hey, we're gonna. And the guy's like, okay, hold on. And I asked the guy next to me why, and he goes, oh, we have to floor it over this bridge because we're always getting lobbed at while we're on there. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, they always miss though. It's totally cool. And I was like, okay. So we're going across, all lights off. He's hauling ass as much as a Humvee can. Like you got to be going downhill and have a lot of weight for those things to move fast. And I can't see anything. It's totally dark. And I'm just holding on like, oh, okay, I hope this works. And you could hear stuff. Nothing was really that close, but I just thought it was hilarious.
These being humble, Jeremy. All right, you were getting shot at in Iraq, and there's mortar fire everywhere, and you have been freaking out a little bit.
I mean, I'm not gonna say I didn't pee myself. I thought about it, but I was just like, holy, and I was like, in my mind, I was like, you guys do this all the time? They're like, oh yeah. I'm like, okay. They're like, that's why we're not worried about it. So I was like, look, if these guys do this all the time, they're not worried. I'm not. It was definitely a new experience for me though. I was like, okay, interesting. So that was just one of the, and then the other jobs that I had were just so random. The CO of like LogSu would deploy, we would work for NSW Unit 3 there. And those guys, like the skipper was really cool. And I was a lot bigger back then. I would carry on 250 pretty easy, 260 at probably my biggest. And I was pretty jacked. And he was like, "Hey, I need you to come with me." And I'm like, "Sir?" And of course, the answer is always "Who ya?" That's like your answer for everything. I was like, "Who ya?" I was like, "Where are we going?" And he's like, "Pakistan." And I was like, "Oh, okay." We are not even allowed in Pakistan. And basically, he just came up with like, and I don't know if it's like a cover or what it was, but basically, he had to go talk to this Paki admiral that was part of their like special operations unit. I did like I checked out their chamber. That was one of the reasons I got to go, I guess. And then the skipper was just like, "No, I want you to go because you're big." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I remember there was like 7 checkpoints. I don't know how many there was trying to get to this place, but we would land and we couldn't use anything military because the military wasn't allowed in Pakistan. It's like we were really asked. But I remember them saying, if they do ask, like, we're DHL guys, we're selling. I was like, right, okay, sir, whatever you say. Like that was my answer was yes to everything. I was like, cool, I'm in Pakistan. I've never been here. We go to how many checkpoints. We finally get there. Everybody gets sick because we have to eat the food that they give us. Our interpreter thought it'd be really funny to lie to me and tell me to eat the bone marrow. So I took the giant bone out of the bone marrow and put it on my plate during a giant dinner we had with their admiral, and it was like a showing of, I don't know, camaraderie. And there's just shit particles everywhere. Like you're breathing it in. So everybody gets sick the entire time they're there. And then on the way back, we only stayed for like two or 3 days. Did whatever we were supposed to. He had his talk the way he was supposed to have it. And then we're coming back, and I remember there's the same amount of checkpoints. And at the last checkpoint, there's this really big like security guy. And as my skipper is going through, he gets patted down. And when I say he gets patted down, I mean that dude wanted some extra from the skipper. And it was hilarious to watch because I just made fun of him from behind the entire time. I'm like, "Hey, sir, you making friends over there?" And he's like, "You're next." And so when I'm sitting there going through, this guy's patting me down. He stops, at the little part a little too often, a handful of times, and he like pats my shoulder. He's like, "You wrestler?" I was like, "What?" He's like, "The WWF." And I was like, "No." And the whole time the skipper's looking back and you're like, "Told you." So these are the weird jobs that I've had that they're not, I don't know, like maybe they are normal, but they were really cool and I really enjoyed them. They make for really great memories and stories. But to get back to like the whole
Can you tell
perseverance
just
thing,
like one last story? I want to hear more. You've told me before about the Dolphin Project, like what you guys were doing stuff with mines, and there might have been some things that have happened with that that you can or can't share. But can you tell us a little
honestly,
bit
like
more about like
I
what
don't
the
know.
Dolphins were
We only
doing?
really had one real job once, and that was during our deployment. But it's what exactly do you want to know, I guess?
Yeah, like what were the Dolphin like? What exactly what was their job, and how did they interact with you guys as divers? And you guys were, I
Oh
know you
man,
told me a story at one point where you were swimming and you had like a mine strapped to your back.
who definitely not that.
Okay,
But I
other
have been.
dangerous stuff.
I did have a dolphin try to rape me once. So
Oh my God.
that was interesting. And that was just because like our job is to tell the feeders when to feed them. If you're, we call it whiskey diving. Like you go and you find the mark, and there's a certain amount that has to be for them to get fed. And you come up, and if you make the signal of, hey, they didn't find it, like that dolphin's smart. Like some of them are like half blind. They're really old. Or at least most of them are. And so it will connect you with not getting fed. And so this one K-Dog, he passed away in the last 5 years, I want to think. He was in Vietnam. Like this dude was, he had like one eye. He had like I don't think he was the one with a shark bite on him. I think that was another one. But like he was salty and he liked the boys, and whether you were a dolphin or not a dolphin. And that's also a dominance thing for them. So I was in the water, did my sign, and the handler let go of him. Not on purpose. I'm sure it was on accident, and I just remember going, "Wags, get in the boat." And I was like, "What?" So I'm trying to make it there, and they're like, "Hurry up." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And nobody told me that he was circling, about to, get me a little bit, but I found out pretty fast. So I get on the side of the boat and I'm about to get in, and he literally pops up and just beams me in the back of the head, and then I just feel him like moving right onto the side of the boat until they pull me in.
Terrifying.
It was, but it's hilarious. So that's one of the funnier stories. As far as the jobs, I don't know if there's been like a real like job other than we did find some stuff that we had to find in Iraq and Qasar and Al-Zubair was more of just a warehouse. But I do remember so going to these places, and I don't know how else to say this, but it was like the wild, wild west. There was very small amount of rules for what was going on. They had rules of engagement. They kept on rolling out for what we could and couldn't do. And there was a lot of them. But for the most part, I remember, and this wasn't even like a patrol, but we were walking up like one of the beaches where we were at, and we ran into another set of divers walking back from the other way. No idea they were there. Like, they didn't know that we were there. And their whole job was to walk up and down the coastline, find any ships and beach them. And I thought that was super cool. And when Mikey Coates, he's one of my old buddies of mine. I don't know if he's ever going to listen to this, but just randomly finding somebody in Iraq walking down the beach. Who does that? And then one of the things that we found, I don't know if somebody found it for us and gave it to us or what it was, but there was an entire barge just full of mines. Luckily, none of them were armed, because I think that the Iraqis just didn't have a heart for it. They didn't want to be there anyway. They were being told to do something. They just forgot to do a whole bunch of shit. I'm positive. So we had this giant barge, and it was rigged to go. Like, the whole thing was rigged to like push them off and basically just get that whole swath of that river that we were up, because that's what it was. It was the coming in from like Buoy 23 all the way up to like, I don't remember what the other river was, but and that's where their one port was, and that's where we were. So we found, or somebody gave us, or whatever, and I just remember when we got it back to, I want to say Kuwait. And while we're there, I remember specifically, like, everyone wants picture ops, right? With everything. There was guys that were getting AKs. There was guys that were taking photos at all these Iraqi palaces with tons of, Saddam pictures and that kind of stuff. People were trying to find those gold AKs and hide them away, which they wouldn't let us take anything because they ended up looking at all of our boxes afterwards, which was a huge bummer. But I remember specifically going for a photo op on one of these barges, and my buddy decides to get up on a Luga mine. A Luga mine looks like half of a Hershey's Kiss. And so he's up there. I want to say that's a Luga. Maybe that's a Mana. Either way, it doesn't matter what it is. He's up there and he's grabbing it. And I wouldn't know because I'm not an explosive ordnance disposal guy. And I know that none of them are armed, but there are arming pins on them. And I don't know if they were rendered safe or whatever. I just remember the only EOD guy we had with us was like, hey, you might want to not do that. And there's this guy, he's basically humping the mine, like doing the ass slap, the whole thing, trying to get a photo op of it. And, the guy's like, hey, you might want to not do that, because just stop. And that was, the mentality.
Yeah, that'd make me uncomfortable while we're nearby.
At the time, we're like, whoa, hey, man, let's not, do that. But that was like I said, it was the Wild West. It was a lot of rules just weren't there. But either way, the whole reason I'm telling that is because, the next part of the story does get a little bit more sad, but there was a lot of really good parts to being in part of the military for that long. The sad part is, the part where I broke, and it's good because we're at about half of the hour, so this should work out pretty decently. But Austin ended up, leaving VSW, and whenever I was, going along, so he would call me, and he was at EOD school. He wanted to be a bomb technician. I tried to convince him a lot to go deep sea, but he wanted to do something else. And so I supported him. He would, call me, and he would want to, like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to pass this or this, that, or the other. And he ended up making it, and he was at his first command. And I don't remember the exact year. I know we can look it up on Google. I can ask my phone the year that he died, but it was his first real EOD deployment. And he was almost done. I feel like every sad story is like that. I feel like everything that's tragic happens like the last week or two whenever you're there and you're almost done, and he was. And what happened to him, they had to rewrite the standard operating procedure for that type of rendering safe of that ordinance, because it was an unknown factor and it killed him. And I don't know if it killed the guy next to him, but he was like 90% burned, or I could be misquoting. This is what I remember. And I remember specifically whenever I got that call, I was being a douchebag in Pacific Beach, and I was just at the Globo gym, doing my thing, and my buddy Gary calls me, and Gary never sounds serious ever. In fact, he's very annoyingly just an annoying person. And he goes like, "Hey, I've got some bad news," and I didn't register it whenever he was telling me. Like he's like, "Austin's dead," and I was like, What do you mean dead? Like like was he drunk somewhere? Like what? Like no, like he's dead. He told me the quick story, and everything kind of fizzled for me just because nobody. I mean, there's been people that have been close to me that have died, but this guy like kind of grew with each other through the Navy. We did some. He was just an awesome individual. Like many of the. I mean, I'm sure everybody feels this way whenever somebody close to them dies. And I just remember I sat down in 24-hour fitness, and I just nothing, just started crying, and I was just I didn't know what to do with it. And that day I remember leaving, and I was driving around, and I didn't know where to go, because I think this is kind of like a buildup of all of the horrible shit that happens to you. Like everybody else that's passed leading up to this guy. And for some reason, I really felt like I was making it about me and how I felt about it. But sometimes that's how you get through it, I guess, in a sense. And I ended up at the Rock Church, and I remember because they were closed. I walked up to the door because I was like, I didn't know what else to do other than say I wanted to talk to somebody. And so I go up to this door, and it's closed. And I just started walking around the outside, and there's this little back lot there that has a cross. It's a really big cross. I want to say it's like the length of or the height of the building. And there's this bench back there, and I just go back there and I sit down, and I start praying, and I'm crying, and I'm praying, and that's not something that I've really ever done.
I bet they were probably more like foxhole prayers, right? If you get me out of this, Lord, I promise I
Oh
won't
yeah.
do it
Yeah,
again.
you always have like the joke like, oh my gosh, I'm stupid. Like this one was, I think, the first real prayer I've ever given in my life. And for me, that was the starting point. I mean, it took me a long time. I want to say like 15 years more, to figure out how to process all of this stuff. But that was like the starting point for me, is that an individual that I was close with, died, and everything else that accumulates in your life, that was tragic that you never dealt with. Eventually, it all adds up, and that's been kind of the going on story of my life, even with the physical stuff. Like it's all additive, like mental health is no different. Um, but I think in saying that, and starting the prayer, I want to say that was, man, I want to say it was like 2005, 2006. I got saved November 8th of 2009. And I know it because I wrote it down in my Bible. It took me another 9 years to get baptized. And that's because I'm just a stubborn dick when it comes to stuff. Like, I don't like being told what to do. I don't like being led to stuff. And I'm so happy that I finally started going that direction. But that gap between whatever it is, 2000s, that's 3 years of trying to figure it out. And I had a really good friend of mine, and we don't talk anymore, but we kind of were going through a lot of the same stuff, and we would go to church together. And if anybody knows me, you know that I'm not a crier. My wife likes to joke that I don't have feelings, and I do. It's just never really a good one. But music, um, feeling that for some reason will always get me. And when you go to church and you have that worship beforehand, like I think every single time I went to church, and that was me, communicating with God in my own way. Even if I didn't pray that way, even if I didn't want to be saved that day, every time I listened to worship, I would be choking back tears every time, or I would just be crying. And that's how I knew, for me, that emotionally, it was emotionally satisfying to some point later in life. Not at that point, I just thought I was being a little bitch most of the time, which, you're not.
I'd like to
Emotions are,
think of it as you were being vulnerable. You don't call yourself that.
that's a good way to think about it. and I've never really been vulnerable before. And I think that at some point in time, all the rawness of these tragedies get to you, and you will become vulnerable whether you like it or not. I'll put it that way. Either you can choose to be vulnerable or it'll be chosen for you. And whenever you break, it is not pretty. For the next however many years, I still struggled with women, booze, drugs, and all the while going to church, mind you, like that's horrible. Like I was still leading the same selfish life the entire time, you know, trying to be good because of my own loss that I felt, trying to find a way to have that correlate and then still do the things that I wanted to do because I was a selfish shit. Like they don't work that way, but whenever you're young and you're stupid, not anything against everybody that's young and stupid that may listen to this, but you learn a lot as time goes on. And everything that I've done has led me to where I am now. I know everybody likes to say that. That is no different. I don't think anybody comes out into the world knowing the crap they know when they're almost 50. I think the world would be way different if you did. But all of this part led me to, the suffering your mind will put you through, the guilt, whether it's somebody that dies near you, somebody you die that maybe a family member, you get these emotions that you still can't process. And, while prayer can help, you still need to talk about it. And for those that are stupid like me, you don't want to talk. You don't want to show any type of weakness. You don't want to be that person that needs it. And this is what the military kind of conditioned. I remember whenever they started talking about PTSD and, going and seeking help and, it was like, what are you talking about? And the mindset was, nope, not me. I know so many guys that have suffered with their own mental madness with that, just because anybody that knew, and you would see stories about it, if you went to the military at that point in time, they would find a way to process you out, for whatever you're being affected with. And that's not what they were portraying beforehand. That's not kind of help that they said they were going to give, but everybody knew it. So none of us said anything about anything. We're just like, nope, we're good. And you just carry on, and you would stomach it and you would absorb it, and it would wreak havoc on your life and your relationships. And so like, I think I started recognizing that on maybe some kind of subconscious level. So instead of just going into that, I would encourage anybody, even in the military, I think they're way more forgiving of it now. Go. I started therapy over 15 years ago after Austin passed. And I started going because I didn't have a choice. Like I was going to seriously either destroy my life or somebody else's. And I sought help. Just I didn't let the military know about it. And I have a buddy of mine that is about to retire sometime soon. And he's going to be at 29 years. And, he ended up saying something. I remember me and him talked about it a couple times. And where he was at, where I was at are two different places. Where he was at was very Navy. Where I was at was very deep sea. There's a big difference in those two things. And I remember telling him specifically, like, don't say anything. I was like, go seek it on the outside, but don't say anything. They're going to try to process you. They're going to try to kick you. They're going to try and take away whatever it is that you got, because that is the Navy in a nutshell. As far as if you're talking about big Navy, like that's big Navy. They're like, you got a problem? We don't want to deal with it. It's changed hopefully a lot since then. But he ended up saying something, and man, his life got so hard for like the next 5 years, 6 years. They tried doing everything to this poor guy, and all because he was hurting severely, and he didn't know what to do. And he asked for the help, and he did not get it. And now, instead of using all that time and energy, money, maybe, to go and seek real help, to get the help that you need to be able to grow from this experience, persevere, get through it. Instead, he's trying to defend his job and keep it. And I thought that was the most effed up thing he's not the only story. There's many stories that are like And that was the reason a lot of us never said anything. And a lot of us have some pretty big mental hangups because of it. So I just wanted to point that out. It's like, if you know somebody that's struggling, like therapy, I can't say it enough. I can't yell it loud enough. Go. I went through a handful of different therapists. Finally, whenever I was getting ready to retire, I finally let the Navy know. It took me 19 years to finally share with them, because if you don't, then you don't get any disability for it. Like, you don't get anything for it. Like, there's if you get out, and the military does wreak havoc on your mind, body, soul, in a lot of different ways, and you can benefit from it and you can build on all those, but it is harsh. And if you leave and you don't ever get the bennies that should be coming to you, they'll give you a swift handshake and a pat on the back and you're out. And then to try and reclimb that hill, to try and get, like, years later, you'd be like, oh man, my joints are just crap. Mine are. I got some severe arthritis. I'm sure most of us do at this point in time, but it's all related to it. So if you are in the military, anybody that's in the military, tell them to make sure to document everything, and therapy. And I can't.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are ridiculous. Scott and I, through our company Fire Zone Fit, we actually did a fundraiser. It was a 50-mile ruck over the course of August. Scott, if you want to share some of the statistics, that'd be interesting to hear. But this is a real deal, guys. Like, I've not just heard it from Jeremy, but this is the way the military was maybe back then. I don't know if it still is, but these men and women are coming home from Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever in the Middle East, and they're afraid to get help, and it's scary. And then unfortunately, what happens is what happens. Scott, if you want to share some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any statistics right offhand because it's not something that's
I
just
got one.
yeah, go ahead.
Every 22 minutes, a vet takes their life.
Right.
Yeah, the name
Yeah, that
Mission
was
22 came from.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was part of our ruck challenge that we were part of. But it's not just isolated to the military. It's also in the first responder community and
Yeah.
beyond both of those as well. So, I appreciate y'all bringing awareness to that for sure. And there's so many tools that are out there. And something that we've realized too in the fire service is that, at least through the assessments that we do through the company that we do assessments through, is that it takes a lot more than just a lot of tools than just therapy. The support group
Yeah.
that you have of friends, family, spouses, as well as continuing to engage in physical activity. You don't have to be breaking PRs or anything like that, but staying active allows your body to process and not um, capture and hold a lot of those negative chemicals like cortisol or anything else that can come from stress or stress crisis type events, as well as eating habits and sleep as well. So all of those things are kind of tools that you need to kind of keep in your toolbox. But I think you brought up a really good point, Jeremy, is just being willing to accept the fact that something is going on, not only recognizing it, but doing something about it. So that recognition, that ownership, and taking responsibility in that, I think is huge. Because a lot of guys aren't willing to be vulnerable a lot of times because they do see it as weakness. That transparency sometimes they see as weakness, but honestly, it's a strength to get to a point to where you can not only recognize it but do something about it. So.
I wanted to pause here and see, does anybody in the live audience have any questions or comments? Scott, I know you've been monitoring chat. Now would be a great time if anybody has a quick question as Jeremy starts to wrap up here in the next few minutes. Please let us know if we can answer any questions, or if you want to hear another funny story or whatever it may be.
I got
Please let
stories
us
for
know.
days, so just don't know which ones I can share with you guys. Well, while we're waiting for any of those to come through, or someone wants to come off their mic or whatever it happens to be,
Oh yeah, come off mute. Everybody's on mute by default. If you did want to chime in, please unmute yourself. It's on the bottom left of the screen.
I just wanted to share one of those things. Oh, here we go. Does it say a few mental hangups? Almost, I can't read that.
The question is it safe to share mental hangups while you're in the military? And it was from Wendy. She was asking, I guess, Micah, maybe.
Well, I mean, if that's a question for Micah, then I'm not going to share or divulge anybody's information. I just know that there's a lot of people that have shared, and it didn't go as well as what they wanted it to. And I don't know if that still exists now, but I know that there's a couple people in the military that are still in if they wanted to respond to that, and just you can just type it like it's not like that anymore.
Yeah, what's it like, guys that are
Or it was and it sucked. Well, as a there we go.
Mike is saying if you need help, get the help. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. Military comes and goes. Your life is forever. Yeah. That's good.
Well, hey, as we're wrapping up, I did want to share this one last, piece of this is that oh, I didn't even see those pictures. Is that me? That is me. Oh, geez. Yeah. Yikes. I don't remember looking at those. I do remember when he had to put me over there because you got to stay straight for so long because of the intracranial pressure. And I will say this about Mayo Hospital. They're awesome. And for some reason, I really love the pudding in hospitals. Just if you've ever been in a hospital, the pudding is really good. They will lie to you and tell you don't have chocolate. They do. You're fucking lying. Get on them. But I think in a nutshell, like I really wanted to share, like you can be a piece of shit for most of your life. You can have horrible things happen to you. You can use those things to let them determine the person you're going to end up. And this is anything from, abusive parents, alcoholic parents, maybe, sad to say, like somebody had an encounter they shouldn't have at a young age. Like there's all these things that help shape you. And when you're in your 20s and 30s, you let those things define you. You let that be the reason why you are the way you let that be the reason why you behave it, even if it's just monumentally destructive. You're okay with it because you're like, I got this, and you're not okay with it. You just don't know any better because you were never taught. So know that it's okay to be like that. Life is going to continue on, but the odds of it just becoming better on its own without any interference is going to be pretty slim. It does take, it's not motivation. And I know you guys have probably heard this before. Motivation is shit. Motivation is an emotion. Emotions come and go. So discipline, and education, learning, figuring out what are these things that trigger me. What is it that built me into this person? Why is this not healthy for me? How do I go about change? And the odds are is you don't have that answer. I didn't. Reach out, like I said, use the therapy. I found God, and in my own mind, the way that I think about stuff is mind, body, and soul. And this is what I want other people to maybe get from any of this is that there's three major factors in your life, and that's how I kind of break it down in a very simplistic way. If you fix those things, and I'm not saying that they're damaged, but most people's are, work on those three things. That will give you a base that everything will follow. Mind-wise, emotions, dealing with your past, dealing with tragedy, dealing with death, dealing with alcohol, dealing with drug use, dealing with pornography. All of these things, like that's all mental. Body-wise, how are you falling apart? I'm falling apart. I got two shoulders that don't work. I got fake parts everywhere. I'm lucky to even be here. What are you doing about it? I every day will do something every day. And it's not what I used to do. And I'm not saying you have to do something every day. I'm just saying like motion is lotion. If you're trying to get your body healthy, mind, body, and then the soul. The soul is always a touchy topic for people. For me, I have no problem ever talking about it. I found God. I love God. God loves me. You know, and I think that I'm walking evidence of that. I can't say enough just by the picture my wife put in the chat. Like I'm blessed. I'm lucky to even be here. And I can't help but think that it has a lot to do with my relationship. I pray twice a day, every day. I don't go to church right now as often as I should, if ever, but that's because my own hangups with churches. But I believe that everybody should have some kind of relationship. And I'll say their God just for the sake of being copacetic with everything, but you know. So
You leaned into a few things to get you out of the rut. It was your
yeah,
faith, it was your family, right? You leaned into family. You didn't really touch on that a whole lot, but really just pouring yourself into family, faith, and just discipline of your life. And maybe an example of that is fitness. I mean, I've seen you showing workout videos over the last few months. I mean, you're for somebody that has almost died of multiple brain injuries and just been through the amount of deaths that you have been through. You're a walking miracle, and we love the story about how you've kind of dug your way out of being that shitty person that I was as well. You
I
know,
do feel better.
yeah.
And in all honesty, the way I kind of think about it sometimes too is I'm like, yeah, I was a shitty person for a long time. And I would like to think I'm not a shitty person anymore. I know that I'm still selfish when it comes to some things. Um, but finding a reason for change from that is so monumental, and it can't, sometimes it's not going to be just one thing, that's why I think I use the whole mind, body, and soul thing. It's like, all right, this is your hang up. All right, let's see what we can do to fix that. Body wise, we're all jacked at this age. There's not one person I know that's at our age right now that is like, I feel fantastic. Like, no, you don't. Just don't. But and then the soul part, however you guys need to look at that, that is my testimony. That is my coming to Jesus testimony. Is whenever
Wow.
I broke, and it took me 15 years, or plus, to be baptized after that. So it is a long road, and it can be a long path, especially if you're stupid like me. Like, I've done so many stupid things, so many, and yet here I am, and I have 3 beautiful children. I am blessed with a 2-year-old, a now 5-year-old as of this Sunday, and a 10-year-old, and they are all amazingly beautiful kids. And I could not be happier with where I am in life right now. So,
Yeah,
Wow. Powerful.
that's awesome.
Really awesome. Well, folks, that kind of brings us to the end of the live podcast. Um, Jeremy, thank you for sharing and being vulnerable with us here in the audience, and just kind of sharing your experience and some hope for those that may have wanted to hear it today. Scott, any parting words on your end, or Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, it was great. There's so many other things that we could probably talk for hours on, but Jeremy, you've been very vulnerable. I really appreciate your honesty, your willingness to come on and share your story. And I think it's going to make an impact to a lot of people. And if anything, like I said before, it could be a legacy piece for your family to share with your kids later on in their life. Hopefully, maybe at some point we can bleep out the F bombs and the and the
hey,
words.
Right. I don't. We don't have
first of
enough
all, I've been a
audio
lot
recording
better,
for
so you're
that.
welcome. For
But
anybody that
no,
gets offended, I am sorry, but I've been a sailor. I was a sailor for a long
Yeah, you
time.
literally are a sailor. You cuss like you are a sailor.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
But
Like,
yeah.
no, seriously, I think you really, the last point that I can touch on is, you said something about finding meaning or purpose or something, and it just made me think finding meaning or purpose beyond yourself. A lot of times when you start thinking inwardly and you start thinking about yourself, you can have pity parties and all this kind of stuff. But when you start to realize, I've got a spouse or kids to take care of, or, trying to influence other people in a positive way, serve others, serve God better, whatever it may be, thinking of finding something outside of yourself for purpose, I think can help you get through those storms in a lot of ways, a lot of times. So, again, thank you,
1000%
Jeremy,
agree.
for sure. Thank you, and who knows, maybe we'll have you on again and share more of your story or just share more of your insight because you got a lot of really great gold nuggets to share.
Yeah,
So,
guys, little
appreciate it.
teaser. We are going to continue these podcasts, these live podcasts. We're going to try to do it every Tuesday at 7 Central. So stay tuned. I've got more exciting guests coming. I'm going to tell my own story coming up soon. I think Scott's going to share as well. So that's a wrap, guys. Stay tuned for the next big live podcast. And thank you for attending. Have a great
Thanks for
night,
having me,
everybody.
guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.